and I am the moderator for this session. I'm part of the Association for Progressive Communications Women's Rights Program as the Policy, Advocacy, and Strategy Coordinator. So before we actually get into the depths of the session, I would like to hand over to Sheena, from the project manager from the Center for Foreign Policy, to give us some opening remarks on feminist foreign policy and what does it mean for her and for the center. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marwa. And welcome everyone. So nice to see you all, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. As already said, my name is Sheena Anderson. I am a project manager at the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy, and we are based in Berlin. We are a research, advocacy, and consulting organization working to bring intersectional feminist to bring an intersectional feminist approach to foreign policy worldwide. And today we are delighted to welcome you to the 7th official side event in our summit season, a whole calendar of events leading up to the first ever Feminist Foreign Policy Summit on the 13th of April, so in about 2 weeks. The summit will be co-hosted by the governments of Canada, Sweden, and Mexico, the Open Society Foundations, and over 15 civil society organizations, and it will constitute an opportunity to bring together the leading thinkers and practitioners in the field of feminist foreign policy to first support the exchange of the best practices, knowledge, and expertise. Second, support advocacy efforts for the uptake of feminist foreign policy among new actors. And third, to take a stand against global inequality and exclusion. And during the various events and panels, we will cover topics such as climate justice, demilitarization and disarmament, understanding and countering the transnational anti-gender campaigns, decolonizing foreign policy, and many, many more. And although in-person participation on the day will be limited, there's also an opportunity to join us virtually. All of the details about our side events and the summit itself, including information on how to register, can be found on our website, but I will also make sure to drop the link in the chat later on. So for this event, including structurally silenced women and women human rights defenders in feminist foreign policy, opportunities and implications, we are so pleased, as already said, to be partnering with Our Voices, Our Future consortium. As an intersectional feminist organization committed to the needs of the most marginalized, but also for me, professionally being responsible for our anti-racism and decolonization program, and personally as a marginalized woman myself, this event and the topic discussed are particularly dear to our heart. And that being said, I now gladly hand over back to you, Marwa.
Thank you, Sheena. And I think we all agree that there is a lot of elements of intersectionality missing out of the feminist foreign policy picture, especially as it has been mainly centering around the state demands and security tenets, and it just been very badly misinterpreted in terms of the demands of women human rights defenders and other structurally silenced communities such as trans people and people of diverse genders and sexualities. So I think today we would like first to actually understand what does feminist foreign policy mean for people from different backgrounds and all walks of life, especially from the global south, as it might actually have a more kind of northern connotation to it, especially when we talk about foreign policy and aid policies and solidarity, and where do we fit as people from the global south. So we also just want to give give a platform for marginalized but also silenced voices to speak to what are the opportunities and the essential implications to actually have a feminist foreign policy. And just like Sheena said, this dialogue is actually leading up to the summit in Berlin. And we're very glad to have Sheena here, who will be actually attending the summit physically there. Yeah, we have a stellar panel here with us today. And before I get to introduce the speakers, yeah, I would just like to also note that this dialogue builds on conversations about women human rights defenders that took place 1 year ago virtually during the Generation Equality Forum in Mexico, where a list of key demands have been developed by a diversity of feminist, gender, and peace-building organizations and feminist defenders. But we would tackle this afterward. So today we have with us Brittany from El Salvador. Brittany is a trans feminist, part of an organization founded and led by trans women in El Salvador. They're tirelessly promoting a gender law in the country in order to include the voices of trans women. Thanks for joining us, Brittany. Yeah, I know it's very early morning there for you. And we also have Titir. Titir is a research specialist from Bangladesh, specialized in issues around gender justice and sexual reproductive health and rights. Thank you, Titir, for joining us as well. We also have Leticia from Uganda. And Leticia is a female sex worker, migrant, queer feminist, proudly living with HIV. She works as the advocacy and networking officer at the Organization for Gender Empowerment and Rights Advocacy, Ogera, Uganda. Thank you for joining us as well, Leticia from Uganda. So we were expecting fourth speaker. Not sure if Elizabeth is here with us. But yeah, regardless, we can just go with the first panel discussion. And so for our first panel question is, of course, just to get a hang of what feminist foreign policy do mean or not do for you as feminist activists from different parts of the world. And so perhaps I'll start off with Brittany. If you can tell us what feminist foreign policy actually mean for you. And just for the audience, we actually have interpretation available in Spanish, English, and Arabic. And since Brittany will be speaking in Spanish, so please make sure to enable the interpretation should you not be Spanish speaking. Yeah, Brittany, the floor is yours.
Brittany, oh, sorry.
Buenos días.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody present here. As my colleague said, I'm Brittany Castillo. I'm a trans woman from El Salvador. And for me, as a woman, I call myself a woman. I am a trans feminist woman. And for me, a feminist foreign policy should be an inclusive policy which can guarantee which will help us find ourselves in a space of political dialogue so that we can change laws, we can change realities, we can change thought processes of all the people. Because in Latin America and Caribbean, the rights of trans people are violated, and we are not recognized legally. Our identities are not recognized legally. So this really leads us to having a life expectancy of only 33 years, which is just half of the life expectancy of people who are not trans people in our country. So a feminist policy would have to include all this, all the realities, all these experiences, all these contexts of marginalization that many people experience throughout the world, because we face different realities, we face different oppressions in some countries in the region. Religion kills you because you're a woman, and here in El Salvador too, this is what happens to trans women. Here in El Salvador, you are attacked because you're a woman, but you also face more violence because you're a trans woman. So there's this whole patriarchal, chauvinistic attitude which we live as women. And this violates us, and it attacks our bodies, because in the feminist policy, these topics or these themes should be included: the right to decide on our bodies, the right to decide on the identity that we want to have, the right to decide if we want to defend our human rights. So this is what a feminist foreign policy or feminist policy should have. It should ensure that the human rights of everybody is guaranteed. We have to try and change the world. We have to try and change thinking. We have to try and change realities. And we also need to try and include other thought processes. Maybe these thought processes will not go to different parts of the community because they do not know about the other side. So that's why I thank you for this opportunity to participate, because this voice of Latin American trans women is something that has to be transmitted, because it is not the same thing being a trans woman in Latin America and being a trans woman in United States or Europe, where countries are more developed, where there are already policies in place that guarantee the rights of this whole community, which is ignored by society and violated. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany, for bringing us closer to the lived realities of trans women in El Salvador. And I think we can all agree that feminist foreign policy is actually multifaceted and cannot have a kind of one size fits all. And perhaps even for the other panelists, building on what Brittany has eloquently shared, is that how would a feminist foreign policy, for instance, in Sweden, make things better or worse for you and for your local context? Because at the end of the day, injustice doesn't happen in a vacuum. And as much as the context in El Salvador is not enabling for trans women to live fully and to decide for themselves, it brings a lot of question marks as to how can we build a feminist foreign policy that is very rooted in the context, without actually kind of simulating the other experiences that happen in the more kind of developed countries, because they have succeeded to make or to fulfill the rights of the people there. And I think it's a good transition to teacher who's working on gender justice and bodily autonomy and sexual rights. Perhaps you can also share with us what you think of feminist foreign policy and what are the key challenges when it comes to the lived realities of people. Yeah, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank
you, Marwa. I mean, I agree absolutely with everything Brittany has said. I would probably like to echo that as well. I think it's absolutely important for feminist policies to place women in all their diversities and individuals in structurally silenced and marginalized communities, individuals with different diverse gender identities, and individuals with different sexual orientations, just individuals in all of the diversities to be placed at the heart of feminist policies. These policies need to recognize precisely um, uh, what are the specific needs and challenges of communities and of individuals. What is, for example, a specific challenge that a sex worker in my community is facing, or a lawyer from my community, a woman lawyer is facing? What specifically is a challenge that someone from the indigenous community is struggling with, or a woman with disabilities is struggling with, and what exactly does that person need? Feminist policies would have to have a greater focus on the intersections of gender and sexuality and ethnicity, disability and diversity, and things like profession and economic background. It's for policies to be feminist, it's important to understand the lived realities of silenced and excluded communities. It's important to sort of understand what changes have to be, what needs to change, what sort of policy needs to be implemented, and how, when these changes come about, they will impact the lives of these communities. For example, in the Bangladesh context, I mean, speaking from, let's say, a policymaking perspective, many existing legislation, particularly around the protection of sexual and reproductive health rights, around the protection of sexual and gender-based violence, on economic rights, protection of rights within a family, marriage rights, which are governed by different religious and personal laws in Bangladesh. All of these are, and also probably also across sort of like a wider South Asian context, all of these are inherently very discriminatory towards women and also towards people with diverse gender identities. Women and individuals of different diverse identities are historically marginalized, have to face structural systemic barriers when trying to exercise basic rights. So they do face greater exclusion, as laws and policies that exist right now do not cater to their specific needs. And we have justice institutions, justice mechanisms like courts, like police stations, legal procedures. They're also not justice seeker friendly. They're also not gender responsive. They're not inclusive, nor are any of these institutions accommodating of linguistic identities or of disability. And access to spaces, whether these are digital spaces, whether these are physical spaces, are still quite limited, particularly for women in Bangladesh, and more so for specific communities like lesbian, bisexual, and trans women, other gender diverse individuals, women in ethnic minority and indigenous communities. There's also a very I mean, civic space has really alarmingly shrunk in Bangladesh across over the years, and this is, I think, a particular problem across in that's sort of been observed in other South Asian countries as well. So which means that we have all of these arbitrary legislation which are used liberally by governments to crack down on any voice that is dissenting, to crack down on anything that is, we have provisions that sort of crack down on things that hurt religious sentiment or values. These are things that should not be built into laws, but they are. So it has made representation in online public spaces particularly problematic for LGBTIQ activists, for CSO representatives, for women human rights defenders, who have to be really careful about using online spaces when taking forward advocacy on issues of gender and sexuality, as the existing socio-political and legal climate is not necessarily very favorable to these dialogues and discourses. All of this really does point, I guess, to a greater need for adopting feminist strategies when we want to make decisions, or adopting feminist strategies for advocacy and building in more feminist conversations for policymaking spaces.
Thank you, Titir, for this very extensive intervention. And I think, of course, the world is currently very hostile towards women's rights, but also especially people of diverse genders and sexualities and people that are marginalized on the grounds of their identities and different kind of other factors, including race, religion, and so on and so forth. And I think perhaps it's also very important to mention that the kind of difference between domestic laws and foreign policy and how the nation would like to be perceived at the international fora, and what does this mean for their kind of for their foreign and external relations versus what actually happens at the local level. And this is why the involvement of civil society actors and grassroots movements is really important to have in order to make sure that everything is much more grounded to the local realities. But yeah, I think just how we are reflecting about the other models of feminist foreign policies that we have and that have been, just for instance, spearheaded by the Swedish government, and how they have kind of like sex-focused areas where they try to step up efforts to ensure that trade policy and trade promotion activities benefit women and men equally. And what does this mean for other interventions in feminist foreign policies in other contexts? So yeah, just to continue the conversation, perhaps I think Leticia is here. Leticia, if you're hearing me, and if you can talk, the floor is yours to also share your experiences of feminist foreign policy and the key challenges that you see.
Yeah, I'm on. Hi, everyone. I am Leticia Deborah Akumu. I work with Organization for Gender Empowerment and Rights Advocacy Uganda. Can I hear anything from the moderator, whether you're hearing from me?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. OGERA is a sex work-led organization, and our target is urban refugees who are migrants and LGBTQ women who are into the sex work job. Just a minute. Yeah, about your question on how I would really define the feminist foreign policy, I would really want to say that it's a big document that I would really look at, and I know it would really be in position to impact the kind of work we do as feminists, but also as women human rights defenders in different places. And to be specific, in Uganda, where there's a lot of challenges, and as a migrant in my country, it is even worse. So I would really define it as, I would want to see a policy that could work as a framework and also be in position to recognize the need to protect women who are most disadvantaged in their different diversities, but also be very inclusive and also recognize the need that there is a lot of constraints around the lives of these women, like stigma and discrimination, like vulnerable to different diseases, also vulnerable to the illegal works that are being done by them in their countries, but also looking at their sexuality that is also being, poorly structured, and also looking at the ethnicity that is being used over time and time. People will always tell you, you're not supposed to be a Ugandan, you're not supposed to be doing this kind of work, you're not supposed to be in this position. You're even stopped from getting what you would be getting because you are not a Ugandan. So I would really like to see that policy structuring all these obstacles, and also looking at the gender, because gender has become an issue in culture, religions, and also the social protection. So I would also look at the policy being a framework to guide and also support, to provide a platform that is going to structurally defend women in their different diversities. And also when we look at the shrinking online space, whereby a lot of different constraints are available, there is cyberbullying that is coming to women. So I would want to see that document being very flexible, and also to being in position to recognize the need to protect, to support, and also to promote the rights of women in their different diversities. For now, that is what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Leticia. And I think, yeah, the message is clear and on how we can kind of define or see feminist foreign policy as a very strong resource and instrumental tool to defend women's rights at the international level, but also at the national and local level. So before we actually wrap up this first panel discussion, I wonder if we have Elizabeth here with us.
Elizabeth, I think you're muted. I think you have to unmute yourself.
Elizabeth, you're muted.
Yes, but I'm going to use Kiswahili. Can you understand Kiswahili? Oh, you can explain, let us somebody to explain.
Sorry, I can't hear you well.
My network, I said I'm Elizabeth Nangol. I'm a Ugandan by country, but now I'm in Kenya, Port Victoria. My work is sex workers, you know, but we have a problem in the Kenyan girls. They used to say for us Ugandans, we came here, but we used her. But let me talk of Kiswahili. You understand Kiswahili?
No, unfortunately, we don't have interpretation for Swahili. So
Swahili, you don't have it?
No, so if you can speak English, that would be better.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, let me try. So
perhaps if you can introduce yourself first, and then just talk us through what you think of feminist foreign policy and what are the key challenges that you see in your own community and lived reality.
Okay, I'm Elizabeth Nangol from Uganda. Now I'm in Kenya, the place called the Port Victoria. I used to work in the bar, but we have problem on the side of the men. They used to use that without a condom. And as Ugandans, we are visitor here in Kenya. Sometimes we come, we don't know the place where we is. They just hide us. We don't have condoms. We don't know where the hospital is. But we used to suffer. But the good thing we have, our sisters, the survivor, they used to come and check us and direct us where to get condoms, to get hospitals, and we go for checkup. But the time we came, we suffer a lot. Are you understanding me? We used to suffer so much. You understand?
Yeah, you can just continue.
You are getting me?
Yeah.
Now okay. We have men, they used to mistreat us, to beat us because we are Ugandan, we don't have We don't know where the police is to go and report. They used to mistreat us, to abuse us. But the good thing, we have the survivors to help us. That is the good thing we have got. Then we don't know where hospitals is, where to get condoms. But we want our sisters, the survivor, to help us to get condoms, hospital, and to guide us where we are supposed to be. We don't have the place where to sit and do our work. We are just suffering. We need your help. Like as the Ugandans, we are in Kenya. We are MENA in Kenya, but we suffer because we don't know where hospital is, where to get condom. We don't know, but we need your help.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, how do you see the rights of sex workers in Uganda or Kenya, like being included in the laws of the country, and to what extent you feel like you have more autonomy over your choices and your bodies?
Our bodies, but sometimes we get some monies, we don't know each other's. We can take in the room. If she gets there, she wants to use you without a condom. We don't know where to report them. But in Uganda, we are used because we know each other's the language we use together. But here we don't know Kiswahili very well. We suffer.
So basically, sorry. So basically, what do you do at the survivors organization? The fact that it's sex workers led, and how do you actually promote the rights of sex workers in Kenya?
Kenya, the use of sex workers in Kenya, they help us. They help us to get things. In Kenya, we just stand in the street. We don't know. We don't have the exact place where to stand. We don't have rooms because us we are visitor here. We are visitor. We are visitor here. We don't know the place very well. Just we are just there. That's why we went to survivors to help us. That is it.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing with us your experiences. And so before we wrap up this first question, and just the fact that there are a lot of experiences being shared, and I thank you for your openness. And it's very much needed to actually just be able to hear from the people than just feel kind of entitled to speak to their experiences. So I guess it makes actually sense to dig deeper into the concept of feminist foreign policy, as we've been hearing different concerns from trans women to migrant sex workers to issues around gender justice and among others. And I feel like it is really important to give it more structure as to what an ideal kind of feminist policy, foreign policy would actually look like to you if you had to be involved in the amendments of these policies, and make sure you give it the right structure, the right tone and mechanism. How would you do it so that it could work for your organization, your community, and the rights you're defending? So perhaps I'll start off again with Brittany, so we, just give more time for the others. Brittany, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Sí, les escucho.
A feminist foreign policy should be one that includes all voices, all issues, and it should work to eliminate violence, eliminate gender-based violence, and also not only one type of violence, but also all types of violence, like could be psychological, emotional, economic violence, sexual exploitation. So all forms of violence affect us, that impact us every day. It impacts women in their entire diversity, talking of Black women, indigenous women, women with disability, women, feminists, also women working for climate change, our colleagues, sex worker colleagues, who are also very marginalized, and they are targeted because they are exercising or practicing sex work. Because in the feminist ethics, we should not judge. We should understand the background of their situation, how they work every day to survive. So a feminist policy should be intersectional. This policy should be intersectional because must guarantee, it must legislate the rights of all people, the right to identity, the right to decide on one's own body, the right to a healthy environment, a clean environment, the right to walk in public spaces without being attacked. So this feminist policy should work with the communities, with people who have different identities in order to effect a change, to address the issues that affect our lives and also structural changes that affect our territories, our bodies, our lives. We should analyze all these realities and also the different contexts that we all live in different countries, in all the countries in Latin America, in countries in Europe, where the bodies of women are criminalized. We don't have public policies with, sexual and reproductive health rights. We need to work with love. We need to work with empathy towards our sisters and see and examine how we must fight against this patriarchal, chauvinistic system which oppresses us every day, which exploits us economically, because we also need to work on how the bodies of women have been capitalized. It's exploitation, how our realities that we experience every day, the care of the care work that our sisters do. The feminist policy should work for all these women who are also in their homes with their oppressors, working, and also the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted women, and we also need to address how the governments address this issue of the pandemic, because it put us in our houses with our oppressors and our aggressors. So we need to understand the situation of these women who have to be all day long with people who are their oppressors. So this policy should understand the reality of extreme poverty of the vulnerable groups. We need to understand the patterns, the stereotypes, the misogyny that exists. And they also generate the hate discourses. Church too, incites hate speeches, and we should have a policy that is inclusive, and we should address the lack of public policies that address human rights. We need to see that the policies also fight for the identity of trans women, because in some countries in the region, there is no law. And how this law has to be a law that is a global law for all trans people all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. And I think it's very relevant to promote a law that works for trans women all over the world, but also that looks at, again, at your lived realities. And I think beyond the fact that, of course, it should be intersectional. I know that, for instance, you, Brittany, you work on gender law precisely within your country, and other speakers here also, they have their concerns in terms of some laws that may actually criminalize trans women or criminalize sex work. Or so just as a follow-up question, if you have a kind of a law in mind that you need to make sure that it's being amended in this feminist foreign policy in order to ensure the rights of trans women in El Salvador, but also globally.
Hola, no entendí mucho la...
What is the question? Can you just please repeat the question? What would you like me to talk about?
Yeah, it was just a follow-up question, just about the kind of laws that you have in El Salvador and that criminalizes trans women based on their identity or their work or other factors. And so if you actually have to amend one of these, just to know what is currently happening legally there.
Okay. Bueno,
in El Salvador, we don't have a law as such that criminalizes our reality, but we have a silence, in fact. It's a complete silence. There's a lack of policies on the part of legislators who are not creating laws. So we have a certain hypocrisy in society, in the state, in the institutions that are supposed to create laws. They don't do what they say or what they sign, or in international forums. They sign international conventions, but when they come to the country, when they come to El Salvador, they don't apply these or they don't comply. So in El Salvador, the struggle for a law on gender identity is more than 25 years old. There have been many legislators, many presidents, but they don't talk about the issue. They don't talk about the realities. They make us invisible. They have us completely clandestine. And that is why I think such spaces are very important, so that we Salvadorian trans women can talk about our rights and we have a voice that reaches out to these legislators, because currently we have a new government, we have a new legislative assembly, and that came into power in 2020, and it archived the law on gender identity. We already had the draft bill for the law on gender identity in the legislative assembly, which is the Congress in some countries. It was already there, this draft bill in the Congress, but these new deputies who came into power, they filed it away. They were the ones who were participating in marches and adding their voices to us, but now they don't want to have anything to do with this. They criminalize us. They criminalize women in El Salvador for having an abortion, even if it is an abortion which is needed for medical reasons. So women in El Salvador don't have the right to decide. You don't give them the right to decide whether they want to be mothers or not. And women cannot decide on our bodies, like I said before. So the greatest criminalization for these women is that they can't decide on their own bodies. But in the context of trans women, there is no law that criminalizes us, but there is an absolute silence by the state. They don't want to talk about the issue. They don't want to comment about it. But they use us because we also vote. We also occupy some spaces which are important for them, because I think that we have worked for so many years. There have been so many governments, but there's no government that has been in favor of trans people. When they come to power, they forget the people with whom they participated in marches. They spoke about the rights of vulnerable people, but now they don't say anything about it. And that is the reality in our country, in El Salvador.
Thank you, Brittany. For sharing this. And I think on this note of just lip service to different communities that are structurally marginalized, perhaps I'll go to you, Titir. And I think, we're just all on the same level of understanding that it's actually needed to have some specific people at the table in order to make this feminist foreign policy be actually feminist and not just be named as such. So who do you think should be involved from your community, and how would this make a difference for feminist foreign policy in Bangladesh, for instance?
I think, like we've already said before, that these policies should have women and LGBTIQ individuals placed right at the center, at the heart of it, or at the decision-making process. But I think it's really important for feminist policies to actually be policies that have been prepared in consultation with and through the active and informed participation of people whose rights the policy is meant to promote and protect. So if it's a policy that is about right now in Bangladesh, we don't have inclusive recognition of transgender rights. We have recognition of Hijra communities, but it's not but that excludes other gender diverse identities from being recognized, and other gender diverse identities from actually being able to exercise rights and fundamental rights and have access to services. So feminist policy that seeks to uphold gender identity recognition would hear from, or would place utmost importance to hearing from the voices of grassroots trans communities from all across the country, would place a lot of importance on actually assessing what the community-specific challenges are and what exactly needs to be done from a community perspective, and translate that into the law, or translate that into the policy that is being developed. It's important, obviously it's greater and actual involvement of structurally silenced communities in the decision-making processes and key advocacy-making spheres, that contribute to all of these policymaking is very important. And in addition to that, I think it would be feminist policies and feminist policymaking processes would also benefit greatly from greater engagement with civil society organizations and NGOs, that work with marginalized voices and grassroots communities on the ground, who it's important to bring in community voices, because communities and individuals who are part of marginalized communities are the best advocates for their own issues, for their own causes. They know best what their concerns are, what their challenges are. They know best what they need, or what the state needs to protect or guarantee, or what the state needs to facilitate in order for them to have access to fundamental rights, opportunities, and services. But they also work closely with civil society organizations to get demands across and get their voices across. So greater engagement of CSOs in the policymaking space is, I think, also something that is conducive to feminist policymaking. And it's also important to just bring in the voices of, or the active participation of, communities who are historically underrepresented. For example, in Bangladesh, there's a lack of political representation of indigenous women. Women with disabilities are very invisible in the legal space, in the policymaking and decision-making spaces, in any space. We don't see trans women in politics. We don't see or other gender diverse individuals. I mean, there's more visibility of trans communities in Bangladesh than there is of LGBT communities, I mean, lesbian, gay, bisexual individuals, or other queer individuals. But I mean, it's still restricted to certain spaces. We don't have inclusive access or inclusive, or we don't have inclusion across the sphere when it comes to people with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity. It makes, because these communities have been historically underrepresented, the fact that policymaking spaces or advocacy spaces are largely, are still sort of like echo chambers, or are still trapped within binary constructions, or still think about cisgender people, for example. That sort of makes representation for these communities, spaces for their voices to be heard and heeded, all the more challenging. So for feminist policymaking initiatives, it's important to put these voices at the front, put these voices at the center. I think it's also important for there to be political will, for governments to be truly feminist, and for governments to truly want to make laws that are feminist. It's important for governments or the state to have the necessary sort of legal infrastructure to sort of support feminist policies, not only enact them, but also implement them in a way that actually addresses the specific challenges for specific communities, in a way that actually supports communities to have access to or exercise fundamental rights. Things, for example, I think it's important to include young people in decision-making spaces and in advocacy spaces. Young people make up the majority of the population right now in Bangladesh, but we don't see young people in decision-making spaces, or we don't sort of, I guess we patronize young people, or we don't think that young people necessarily we don't recognize young people's capacity to make informed decisions about themselves, the capacity to process knowledge about their own rights and responsibilities and entitlements, and make decisions based on that. But it's more, as we move forward, for policymaking to be truly feminist, we need young people to be there as well, young people across a diverse range of communities and backgrounds, young people who are interested in talking about things like sexual and reproductive rights, young people who want to be part of all of this discourse around, gender and discrimination, gender-based discrimination and violence, young people who want to talk about finances and economy, and just young people who have, it's important to not exclude young people from these conversations as well. I think those are some of the key communities, or the key target groups of people who need to be at the table, at the policy-making table.
Thank you, Titir. And yeah, I think historically underrepresented communities such as young people need to be more and more represented. And it's just a matter of kind of structural change to how we do policy making in 2022, right? And just building up on your inputs and going to Leticia and speaking to the enabling environment in terms of like resources and political willingness. How do you see this, Leticia, happening in Uganda, where you're working? And do you see, or do you feel like there is room for more CSOs to be engaged in the process from the get-go and give substantial inputs to the policies that happen there?
Thank you so much, Mara. I want to first speak about the reality that is really happening in my country, Uganda, about sex workers and also migrants, but also LBT people, persons. The reality is there is a lot of constraints around policies that are hindering us to even do more work as CSOs. I'll talk about the sexual offences bill that recently was in Parliament, and it was pushed to the president, who had to sign, but fortunately he hasn't signed it, and that is already a plus for us as CSOs who are advocating for the rights of women in their different diversities. But then there is an opportunity for the president, the parliament, to get it from the president and pass that policy that could hinder a lot of human rights, that could bring a lot of human rights violations around our community and the kind of community that we serve. I also talk about the Anti-Homosexuality Act that just brought a mess around the country, where it provided a platform for violations among the LGBTIQ community, but more specifically with sex workers, because where our work is, it is all about being around the streets looking for our clients. And then it is worse when it comes to someone who is a migrant. This is not your country. There is an issue of language barrier. There is an issue for even the documents. Probably if you have like educational backgrounds, it's very difficult for someone to hire you because you're a migrant. So the only space and the only way we can champion is to do the kind of work where I can employ myself, and that is sex work. So the reality is, it is a lot of constraints around policies that are really hindering. And I'm very happy that we're having a discussion around this that is bringing, foreign policies that are going to be targeted to feminists, that will help us, include and recognize the need to promote and protect women's rights, especially women who are silent, who are structurally silenced in their different diversities. And here I want to speak about the women, most especially we, the migrants. So it is a different context that you're even vulnerable to acquiring infections like HIV, because you cannot even bargain for safer sex, you cannot even be in position. It is very difficult for you to go and access, health services. So that is the reality that is happening in my country. And back to your question about resources, it has to be a collective movement for CSOs and also the feminist movement to come together to see how we can conjoin to make sure that at least we are advocating and placing voices for women who are silent, who are structurally silenced in the country. I'll give an example of the inclusion of women who are structurally silenced on different platforms, especially the trans and sex workers, because the moment you're in a platform or a place, probably a meeting, and then you say, I'm Leticia, I'm a sex worker, all eyes will be on you. So that means we still have those issues around the space, places where we are calling spaces, we are not fully recognized. Someone might be in that space and they might say, I am a feminist, but I wouldn't really love to work with the key populations. And who are the key populations? The key population is me, the migrant. It's me, the sex worker. It's me, the queer woman. So it brings a lot of questions on how we are going to conjoin. But one thing I want to say, and one thing I'm sure of, if we have documents, frameworks that are going to give us direction, it is far much more better than just rather than us just coming and speak. But if we have documents that are structured, that are going to be leading movements, like the feminist movement in Uganda, and give it direction to have inclusive policies, to structure, directions that are going to take us to gender equality, because we need to see solidarity and peace, among the discussions that we are driving in different platforms. We need to see that women are literally recognized in their different diversities, and they have spaces and platforms. I don't want to come and speak and say I'm a migrant and I'm put out of the space. That is not what we are working towards. So I want to see that this foreign policy structures, a direction to justice, to solidarity, that is going to make us achieve gender equality, because at the end of the day, we are all advocating for gender equality. And if we have women who are put offside, women who are migrants, if we have sex workers and they are not included in these structures, then that means we are not going to have a lump sum and a holistic, support directed to women in their different diversities. So we need to make sure that all voices of women are recognized, and we need to make sure that there is joint work done. We need to see that everyone is involved, because if I am not part of the discussion, that means the discussion you've carried out is against me. If I'm not included, why don't I be included at the beginning of this discussion? Why don't I be included at every step? If it means to come and rechange and restructure policies, please bring me on table. I want to make sure that if there are resources, if there is funding, please let my voice be heard. Let my voice speak, because I'll be a Ugandan speaking in the document, but then the document will showcase in different countries, and it will help to impact and also reduce the effects that are really happening on different people in the country. So I want to recognize the fact that these discussions are very key, and it needs us to come into a joint movement, we need to come on a billboard that we are all speaking the same matter. And the matter that we want to achieve is gender equality. And we cannot achieve gender equality if we have not involved everyone. We need to see that every woman in their different diversity is recognized at every platform. Allow me in here for now. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Leticia. And I think it's also very important to stop talking feminist foreign policy and perhaps start also funding it in the right way, and making sure that these resources go to the right people and those who have been historically underrepresented and underserved. And I think on this note, about the resources and just having, for instance, Elizabeth as one of the beneficiaries in at the Survivors organization in Kenya, I think it's also important to ask how these organizations actually influence policy, if they think that they have a great influence, or how they want to be involved, or how they see themselves going to be involved. So we'll actually have Carol, Elizabeth's colleague, speaking on her behalf, since Elizabeth is dealing with some noise background, but of course, Elizabeth, feel free to chime in the chat box. So Caroline, if you can just introduce yourself, and then just tell us a bit briefly about the work of the organization.
Hi everyone, my name is Caroline Kemunto. I'm a female sex worker working across the border, that is Kenya and Uganda, and I work with both indigenous and migrant sex workers. And Elizabeth is one of our migrant sex workers coming from Uganda, and she was not able to express herself, but most of the challenges they face is that being a migrant sex worker and working in Kenya has not been an easy journey for them. They face stigma, they face discrimination, both from the fellow sex workers and even from the clients, even from the service provider, because of the language barrier. When they go to access service, most of the time they are not able to express themselves and even say what they are suffering from. And as I was talking to her, she confided in me that she has no information, no idea about the feminism foreign policy, of which even myself being the one that is guiding them and giving them service at Survivors Organization, we lack this information and knowledge. And maybe to add on what my colleague has said, we really need to get this information at the grassroots level, and especially to the leaders or organization working with the cross-border issues and migrant sex workers and other KP typologies, so that we understand. Then when we are able to understand as leaders that are advocating for their rights, we are able to translate this to the level that they are able to understand and demand their rights as female sex workers who are migrants or refugees to be heard. But if they don't know what the laws or the policy says about them, then they will continue suffering and they will not be able to express themselves. So I add to the voice that we really need to understand these policies, and we really want to fight for our rights and our space, and we want our voices to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. For this brief and just extensive intervention. And I think it actually makes sense to provide sex workers with the right platform, but also with the right skills to speak on themselves and to stand up for their rights. So just wrapping up this discussion, this very rich discussion, and moving to the list of the demands that I've previously mentioned that have been developed last year and presented at the Generation Equality Forum Mexico. We just believe that those are very practical and important demands that need to be addressed in any effective, holistic, and feminist foreign policy. So I'll just be briefly reading out the demands. So actually the Coalition of Women Human Rights Defenders, they were demanding an end to the killing of the women human rights defenders, the recognition of women human rights defenders, and an end to stigmatization and hate campaigns against women human rights defenders, freedom for women human rights defenders who are political prisoners, and an end to the criminalization and repression of protests. So I think, we still have another 3. So the protection for women human rights defenders who migrate, seek asylum, and suffer from forced displacement, but also that corporate actors stop dispossessing communities and killing and attacking women human rights defenders who defend environmental justice, land, and territory. And last but not least, the abundant, predictable, and flexible resources for the holistic protection of women human rights defenders. So you can see that it goes from and targets private sector, governments, funders, and other actors. So I would just like you to briefly just tell me which demands stand out the most for you from this list, and if you just are to go in to reinforce one of these demands, which one you would actually choose. And just being mindful of the time, if you could just really make your introduction really, your intervention really brief. So I'll start again with Brittany. If you can just speak to one of these demands.
Well, practically speaking, the demands that we have in El Salvador is the right to decide on our bodies and territory, because I think it's very important for the law on gender identity to be approved, and there should be laws to guarantee the defense of these rights of ours, and that's what's important to us.
Thank you, Brittany. I think it's clear and loud. Going to Titir.
Thank you, Marwa. I think each of these demands are absolutely crucial, and each of these demands are things that we absolutely need immediately. I would maybe, if I had to choose one, pick one, I think I would pick the demand about making abundant, predictable, and flexible resources available for holistic protection of women human rights defenders, and which actually ties into the implementation of other key demands around key protection, recognition of HRDs and protection from violence for HRDs as well. I think this stands out to me, the demand for all of these resources for holistic protection, because it's as, because in my experience in the human rights space in Bangladesh, and I've seen this in other countries across South Asia as well, observed this regionally as well, we don't really, we don't do enough as civil society organizations, as human rights organizations, or as NGOs, or as platforms for activists. We don't necessarily always thoroughly assess all the risks that women human rights defenders have to face as a result of their work. We don't have, in Bangladesh, we don't have laws that recognizing women human rights defenders and their contribution to feminist movements and things that advance women's human rights. We seldom put, seldom put proper risk mitigation and security strategies in place. We don't explore all the different ways in which women human rights defenders can be supported, what needs to be added to an organization, what needs to change at the state level, at policymaking levels, to us in order for women human rights defenders and other rights activists representing different communities to have the kind of holistic support that they need. And when we, as CSOs or as NGOs, when we receive funds from different countries, we receive foreign aid, and we build programs around gender equality and gender justice, we don't always build in flexible funding that can be used to respond to crisis situations where women human rights defenders are affected. And we don't have specific budget allocated around protection and security. So I think this is a demand that I would really like to echo and take forward, because it's very relevant to the context here in Bangladesh, and I'm sure it's very relevant to the context for women human rights defenders across the globe.
Thank you, Titir. Yeah, I mean, that's very important to mention, especially as we're always working on a kind of emergency model instead of making sure to prevent and to reinforce our crisis management work. Leticia, which one of these demands stand out the most for you?
Yeah, thank you, Marwa. According to what I've realized in my country, due to the fact that a lot of women have multiple identities, and this causes a lot of vulnerabilities around them, to put them in a place where their rights are violated, where they cannot even be in position to speak for themselves. I've realized that if I'm to select, I would really like to see the protection for women human rights defenders who migrate, seek asylum, and suffer from forced displacement is championed, because this is affecting almost everyone. We are leaving our countries because they're different, probably that the environment is not favorable when it comes to, in terms of, health services, when it comes to, in terms of legal opportunities. We are just being silenced and we are marginalized. So there is a lot of seeking for asylum in different countries from different women. I personally, I'm in a country where I'm not supposed to be, but I came to seek for an asylum way back, and here I am. I've grown in a country where I'm not supposed to be growing from. So when I look at that particular demand, I think it really creates a lot of conversations for me as a person. And then also, I don't want to skip a line without talking about the recognition of women human rights defenders and an end to stigmatization and hate campaigns against women human rights defenders, because most of the times we carry out these campaigns and probably the public perceives it wrongly, probably also the legal fraternity perceives it wrongly. I want to say something that in Uganda, it could be very difficult for us to celebrate the Ida Hobbit Day that happens every 17th May. and also to celebrate the Pride Day that we should be celebrating. We are not in position to. So I think these two demands really outstand for me as a person, and also the kind of work we do, but also the background I have of my originality, my ethnicity, and also being a migrant really shines out for me most. Thank you.
Thank you, Leticia. Yeah, thank you again for bringing up the issue of migrant workers and the protection also of migrant women human rights defenders. Caroline, yeah, if you just have to choose one of these demands, which one would it be? Especially, yeah, just being mindful of the context and the work you do.
Yes, for us, like sex workers working across the border, one of the key things that I really want is to the voice of the sex workers to be included in the feminism, and the sex workers to be part and parcel of the feminism, so that when we fight together as women, despite us being sex workers. I'm saying this because sometimes we felt like we as sex workers have been left out by the people, by the feminism, and we really feel that we should be included in this. So we want the voice of sex workers to be felt and to be heard, and we want our work to be recognized as we fight together as women. This is the key thing that I really want to push for, and these policies I'm still insisting they should be made available for us, and we should be able to understand them and pass them as we protect the sex workers, and even including the East African community. Some of these policies should find themselves under the docket of the East African community, since most of us work across the East Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that these demands, yeah, just relate to different people in different ways, and yeah, this is why we're here trying to understand how this kind of just speak to every one of us. So thank you really for sharing your insights and experiences. Now I'll just go back to Sheena if she wants to respond to all what has been said, but also kind of pick up one of a question that we had in the chat box around how we actually kind of include young people and young people in the process, but also just to give more information to the audience here on how you would actually include their insights at the summit.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for all the information that's already been shared, and for opening up, which at least for me personally is also not always easy. So thank you so much for this. I think when it comes to including, I mean, generally marginalized and often silenced voices, but especially young activists and women human rights defenders. And I can, of course, only speak for the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy. For us, it's just so important and so vital to not only include voices, but actually have these voices inform or actually be the base of any policy decisions that we make in any any approaches that we try to implement. Because I think what we as the center, but also individually, like me and my colleagues, have been experiencing as activists, but also in other roles, is that often people say, oh, we want to include this voice, we want to include that voice, but what does that actually mean? That people often have ideas and then set something out, and then they have a concept, and at the very end, they like, oh, let's ask like a youth activist, or let's ask a marginalized voice. And that's when it's just already too late. So we are trying to really always, be in exchange with grassroots activists, with young people, with marginalized voices. We also try that our team reflects these voices and then include them from the very start, or actually not only include, but as I already said, really have them be the base of any policy recommendations and decisions to be made. I do think, and I think that's already been said before, there's just not this one idea of feminist foreign policy, and you can apply it everywhere. So it just has to really speak to the demands and needs of the people it targets and the people it is for. So just taking into consideration what are like what's happening around people, what's happening in a specific region, maybe only even in a specific village or so, and then also take that into account. That's just so important. And to the question of how are we trying to take all this into account for the summit, I think for us, and that's already one way with all of the side events, because in the beginning we didn't have side events planned, but it was just so important for us to have different civil society organizations and individual activists somehow be present and somehow be part of the summit. So we launched this call for applications for side events, and we're super happy to have various organizations from all over the world contribute and exchange and share their knowledge. And then during the summit, I think what we try to do, or not try, but what we do is really be always as critical as possible and as we can, and to not be, frightened by all of, then there's like government people and, a lot of official things going on, but to really be like, okay, nice that you're here, but where does civil society come in here? What can you really like do personally? And how can we include more people, diverse voices, marginalized voices, and truly listen to them, like not only include, but truly listen to these voices. And I think that will be a challenge, to be honest, during the summit. Not gonna lie here, but we will try. That's all we can do. And then really try to also hold people accountable for the promises that they make.
Thanks a lot, Sheena. Yeah, and I think we can just, we can at least afford to try, instead of just disengaging from the conversation, which is a luxury for women human rights defenders and others communities. So we actually, being mindful of the time, we actually have a last question in the chat box. So from Sasha, we see a contradiction between demands from donors such as France, EU on transparency and not funding terrorist organizations with defending women human rights defenders and need to sometimes not disclose the names of recipients. So what should feminist foreign policy do? So not sure if one of the speakers would like to take this on about, just how funders don't, or EU governments actually, they don't fund kind of terrorist organizations. Leticia, go ahead, please.
Thank you for this question. It's a very nice question that we really need to reflect on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
We can hear you, Leticia.
It's a very nice. Okay, it's a very nice question, and these are the discussions that we have to bring on table to make sure that they are all included in the feminist foreign policy. Because how does it even look like if a donor doesn't want me, to appear anywhere as a recipient. What is that? Then why am I getting the money? What am I going to implement? What am I going to tell the people? Where am I going to tell them I got this money? So I think these are the very, very, demarcative structures that are silencing women, and they are silencing women human rights defenders. Why don't I appear as a recipient if you've given me your money? How did you even start having the discussions to give me your money when you don't want me to appear as a recipient? These are the discussions that we have to go extra miles and have more interactions on this document to make sure that it has a multi-sectorial approach that is going to be even, calling and structuring collaborations with donors to make it a reality, to make sure that we are not offended, we are not oppressed. These are the structures that we need to remove. These are the structures that we need to advocate to end. This is actually discrimination. Why couldn't I appear as a recipient on any of your documents? Why couldn't, if you've decided to fund me, then that means I am in position and I have the right to appear and also to represent you and also to speak about what even structures me. So I really think it is very key for us to have an open-minded document and also use a multi-sectorial approach when we are including these things. That is why earlier on I said, it is very key for us to involve key stakeholders, to involve women who are structurally silenced, to involve them from the planning, designing, and implementation of this policy. That will help us create demand and access for all the structures that are making women marginalized. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Letitia. And I think this question just brings us back to the beginning of the conversation when we actually mentioned how sometimes this foreign policy is very kind of rooted in this aid mindset where donors would be setting their own terms and not actually trying to look at where these funds should be directed and which communities would actually be most served by these resources. And this kind of aid mindset just creates more power dynamics and harm people, but also close spaces and shrinks civic spaces for a lot of organizations. And with that, I think, of course, just like Sheena mentioned, there are a lot of connotations to feminist foreign policy, but one thing is sure is that different constituencies need to be listened, but also need to be involved throughout the process. So I think from my end, I'm looking forward to the summit in Berlin, to the outcomes. And I would like to thank you for being here with us, for sharing your insights and experiences. It has been just a blast listening to you. And it's a wrap. Thank you. And wishing you a good weekend.
Bye, take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.